We're going to do the second part of corporations today, and that involves securities regulation and investor protection. So we're going to talk about corporations in light of regulation and protection. Corporations are regulated first in their stocks and their bonds through the Securities and Exchange Commission. The Securities and Exchange Commission was set up by the Securities and Exchange Act of 1933. In that act, they're required to submit a registration statement for all of the stocks that they wish to issue. And that registration says that it has a certain number of shares that it wishes to sell, the price it wishes to sell them for, and whether or not all those shares of stock are going to be sold at once. There is a thing that we call exempt securities that don't have to go through SEC regulation. Those are small numbers of stocks, say stock under $500,000 in value, or stock which is limited in its scope insofar as the number of investors that will be purchasing it. There are also exempt transactions. Those exempt transactions are too complicated for us to talk about here in class, so I'm just going to tell you there is a thing such as an exempt transaction, and that it involves things like shelf stock, which is very simply stock which has been registered already in the registration statement, but the corporation decides that it is just going to sell maybe half of what it submitted in the registration statement. So an exempt transaction would exempt certain types of stock and certain amounts of stock from regulation. Violations of the 1933 Act all involve the registration statement and exempt securities and exempt transactions. Restricted securities are acquired under Rule 505, 506, or Section 4(6). Must be registered for sale unless the investor follows a rule that they call 144. That 144 can result in some type of violation. Those violations are those that can result in administrative action, which means that they may have to go through an administrative law judge for all sorts of redress. Or there may be injunctive action, and an injunction, as you recall from when we were talking about trials, injunctions are the kind of an action in court which can make an individual stop what they're doing for a certain period of time. There are two types of injunctions. There's an emergency injunction, which is only for 90 days, and that emergency injunction then has to be reviewed for a permanent status. So there's emergency and permanent injunctions. The permanent injunction would last until the court deemed it unnecessary otherwise. However, the temporary injunction is only for 90 days, and that's to facilitate a hearing on a permanent injunction. Then they can also have criminal prosecutions as well for fraud, violations of the Securities and Exchange Commission rules, and the law itself. Section B of Rule 10 of the Securities and Exchange Commission Act prohibits the use of manipulative or deceptive devices to bypass SEC rules. Now, what's a manipulative and deceptive device? This goes all the way back to 1934. Here's an example. A few years ago, there was the institution of computer trading, right? And computer trading said that you could enter purchases and sales of stock on stock exchanges using computers. Well, what some trading companies were doing was they were looping their computers both in feed and readout by about 10 milliseconds. Now that 10 milliseconds was just enough time for them to pick up and trade their own stock at higher prices so that they could make a profit when the sell orders came through 10 milliseconds later. Now that was considered to be a manipulative and deceptive device. And the SEC took them to court. Then we also have insider trading. Insider trading has an employee or executive that takes material that they know about from their work inside the corporation to make a profit. For example, there's a guy standing at a bus stop, which is right outside the corporate offices of a very large corporation. And that individual who's out there just happens to overhear the president and his son-in-law, who is the vice president of the corporation, talking about how they are going to merge with a larger company. Well, they think it will make the company more valuable. Well, there's somebody inside there that is going to make a trade. Two ways to do this: insider and outsider trading. The son-in-law is inside. What he does is he goes and he buys up a bunch of stock of the other company, so that when his company merges with that company, his stock becomes much more valuable because the two companies merge and their stocks become one and the value goes up. So by being on the inside and knowing about all these things, he has managed to make a profit. Now, and according to the Securities and Exchange Act of 34, it's illegal. Let's talk about the guy who's standing at the bus stop outside the building with the window open. He overhears the president and his son-in-law talking about how much money they're going to make when these two companies merge. And so he goes out and he buys a whole bunch of stock from both companies. He is careful, though, to buy stock in the company which is less highly rated. Then the two companies merge. The stock becomes one. And what happens to the stock of the less expensive company? It goes up. So then he can sell that and make a profit. But that's also not legal according to the Securities and Exchange Act of 1934. So we had insider trading with the son-in-law, and we have outsider trading with the guy standing at the bus stop. Now, how far can insider trading go?
Well, I mean, if it's illegal, probably not that far.
If it's illegal, but it's not that far? Let me tell you how far it can go. The son-in-law goes to the telephone and calls his wife and says, "We're going to merge with this new company." And the wife gets real excited and says, "That's wonderful. I'm going to tell Mom that we're going to be doing really well in the near future." She calls her mother and tells her about that. Mom goes out and buys a whole bunch of stock. Now, is the spouse of the son of the president an insider trading? No, but is she in the chain of information? Yes. Guess what that makes Mom? An insider trader. Because she got information from the inside. Now this chain can go on as long as it's necessary to find out where the information got to that came from inside. Now, if the pool boy is standing outside cleaning the pool and he hears the executive's wife get real excited about this and he figures something's up, but she doesn't tell him, he just figures there's something up and doesn't really know, and he goes out and buys some stock in the company because he already held some. And he thinks it's really a good idea to hold that stock. Is he an insider trader?
No.
Right.
Because he just overheard it.
He did not overhear it.
Oh, no, he did not.
He did not overhear it. He just saw her get excited about it and knew she was talking to her husband, so he went out and bought some more stock. So he's not an insider trader. And he's not an outsider trader either, because he didn't exactly hear what that information was. But let's talk about the guy who was standing out at the bus stop again. This is going to get complicated, isn't it? So he's an outsider. He hears the information, and he goes over and he tells his Uncle Ralph, that he should buy some stock in the company. Why is he going to buy stock in the company? Well, just buy the stock in the company because they're merging with somebody and they're going to go up. How do you know? I heard it standing outside at the bus stop. Well, Uncle Ralph, being a pretty smart guy, knows that that was not a good idea for him to overhear that, and he asks his nephew, "Did you buy any more stock?" And the nephew says, yeah, I bought some stock. And his uncle says, "Get rid of it." And he says, "Why?" He said, "Because you're an outsider trader. You heard the information from the company and it was not legal. Get rid of it." But what does Uncle Ralph do? He goes out and buys that stock.
So as long as you don't say anything as far as I heard it or you're inside of it, you can buy something.
Here's the thing. If you are trading with information that can be shown to have been from inside the company, whether you hear it directly from those people or not, they're somewhere else. If it's an insider, then it's insider trading. And that can go on and on and on. And the SEC is going to come after everybody in the chain. If it's an outsider trading, they only can find as far as the information actually goes. Because at some point, some relative or some person they know who buys the stock is going to buy it just because he sees his friends and his family buying it, but they don't tell him anything. And that just breaks the whole chain. And they're not outsider traders, they're not insider traders. So it can get, and trying to figure out who is what and how it works and who's buying what from whom, it can get a little complicated.
So is that like jail time or?
Sometimes, but not frequently. Usually, when you're dealing with the SEC, we're talking about paying back all of the profit and the money that you put up for the stock, plus any dividends you receive, and a fine on top of that. But you don't have a lot of jail time being associated with insider or outsider trading. Okay? Then we have something we call misappropriation. And misappropriation is an individual who uses inside information for profit. That misappropriation theory is the formal name for the use and the purchase of stock from insider information. So that's called misappropriation theory. So we have insiders and we have outsiders. And I explained the chain of how things can go. What about the terms tippers, tippies, and fiduciary duty? Let's talk about what a tipper is. we had the president, and we had his son-in-law. Or his son-in-law, who's the vice president. We have the son-in-law going and calling his wife. Now, is he a tipper?
Yeah.
Why would he be a tipper?
Because he's giving her a tip.
He's giving her the information that she needs.
Right.
Now, if she goes and buys the stock, she's a tippee. Tippee.
Is that T-I-P-P-E or T-I-P-P?
Yes, T-I-P-E-E. We have tipper, T-I-P-E-R, and tippee, T-I-P-E-E. So, anybody who tells somebody about the inside information is a tipper. Anybody who uses that information to purchase the stock from that inside information is a tippee. Okay? Same thing with outsiders. Anyone who uses outside information that was acquired somehow from overhearing something remotely or something like that, they become tippers if they tell somebody else about it. And the person that goes out and acts on it is the tippee. And remember, if all of this stuff is going on and everybody sees there's a large volume of trading in a particular stock, and they just say, I wonder what these people know. I think I'll just go buy a few shares. There's no insider trading, and there's no outsider trading. There's no tipping. There's no tipping at all. Is that a word, tippering? I don't think so. No, there's just no association at all if somebody just thinks about it and does it on their own. Okay? Then we have fiduciary duty. Now, we've talked about fiduciary duty before. Stocks and bonds and companies have a fiduciary duty to the company not to reveal information about the company that's going to lead to changes in their stock prices or stock purchases. They have a fiduciary duty, which means they have to be loyal to the company, which means that they don't tell anybody anything until after, say, the merger has happened. Okay?
Question.
Yeah.
So, say if Nike did that, wouldn't that make Nike more wealthy if everybody just buying into the stock? Because that's still going into Nike. Is that why it's illegal?
No, it's not illegal because Nike's making a profit. But you see, most tipping and purchasing from being tipped is done through what we call a secondary market. Companies who initially issue stock under the Securities and Exchange Commission Act of 1933. They register the report, they tell people how many shares they're going to issue, and then they sell it. The company gets the money for that. Okay?
Right.
Okay. So, they are financed by the initial issue, sometimes what we call an initial issue. The secondary market is when I have stock that I own. I have stock that I own. I want to sell it, and I go to my broker and say, sell this stock on the exchange. So a secondary market is between one seller, an agent, the market, and the purchaser. 1933 mostly regulates initial issues. Okay. The 1934 Act mostly regulates sale after the first market. So the second market, the third market, and the fourth market. I won't go into what the third and the fourth markets are because they're very complicated. You'll learn about those when you get into investments and finance in your courses later on here at FISC. So insider reporting and trading is something that the companies look for to make sure that's not happening. And every 6 months, employees have to fill out a report. I did. I worked for a private corporation that was public. I just almost contradicted myself there, didn't I? A private corporation was a business, let me say this, a business who was traded as a public company. I had to fill out a report under Section 16 of the Securities and Exchange Act of 1934 that told the SEC and my own company, if I bought any shares of our own company myself during the previous 6 months, and if I bought more than a certain amount, how long I was going to keep it, and what I was going to do with it. All right? Because if you buy it, keep it for less than 6 months, and sell it, then everyone is assuming that there's some sort of inside information that is coming out of that that needs to be investigated, and the SEC picks up on that. Okay? And that violates my fiduciary duty if I'm doing that. So corporations will require individuals who purchase stock of their own corporation to hold on to it for not less than 6 months. A lot of times it will be as long as years. Okay? Proxy statements. What's a proxy statement? Anybody know what a proxy statement is? We mentioned it before on Tuesday when we were talking about corporate formation. Does anybody know what a proxy statement is?
That's the meeting?
That's the vote and the meeting thing, right? Remember, we talked about how every year, when you're a stockholder, the company will have a slate of people or directors that are going to be voted in, or issues that they need to address. So what they do is they go to the stockholders, and they send you a booklet that has all of these issues and all of these things in it. And you have to read those, and then in the back there's a statement, a proxy statement, and that proxy statement says, pick the director that you would like to vote your stock, unless you're going to the meeting yourself. It's always good to go to the meetings yourself, but if you can't afford to go to all of the meetings yourself, like most of us can, we fill out the proxy and send it back, and then those directors vote our shares for us. We have to be very careful about the directors we pick to do this. They have to reflect as closely as possible our personal positions on those issues, or our proxy is just wasted. So does everybody get the idea of a proxy statement? Because that goes along with stock, owning stock. Investment companies, such as the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, and the state and local stock exchanges, are all self-regulated. That means that there is no government agency that has rules and regulations that tells them what to do and how to do it. Okay? It tells them how to do it. They get together and they create their own rules and their own regulations. Sometimes states have security laws which will regulate companies. or stock exchanges. Now, I said before, last time, that individual states have their own stock exchanges. Well, they can be regulated by state law. And so not only would the investment companies be self-regulated, but local stock exchanges will regulate stocks and exchanges in their particular state. Then we have technology and securities law. Technology has vastly changed the way we trade securities. Most securities used to be, this is how it used to be, long time ago, they say the trading posts are, like at the New York Stock Exchange, are called pits. They say you have to go, if you're going to trade in one of the commodities, you have to go to that commodity pit. Well, these days, commodity pits are round kiosks that have all the commodity prices and stock exchange information on them going around in a circle, and there are traders there from various trading companies who will accept and trade your stocks. That's what a pit is. It's just a location on the floor that trades in that particular type of stock. It used to be, a long time ago, that there were actual pits in the floor where the securities folks would have a big wooden post like a telephone pole, and they'd tack up little like sticky notes on it that had a stock name, what the seller wanted to sell it for. And if there was someone who wanted to buy it at that price, the trader would go and pull that off, locate that person, and sell the stock to them. So sales are made now by computer in those real nice electronic pits in a matter of seconds or a few minutes, or sometimes nobody will pick up the stocks at all. If they don't, well, you just don't get a sale. But I was also going to tell you, has anyone ever been to the New York Stock Exchange? Have you seen pictures? Oh, you have?
I've been like right outside.
Oh, outside. You see the guys and the gals coming in and out. And they have different colored jackets.
Yeah.
What do those jackets mean?
I actually don't know.
You actually don't know.
They're level.
They're level, that's part of it.
Is it where they're coming from?
Where they're coming from. Every company, every investment company has a different color jacket. So if you go in there and you have Goldman Sachs, you go in, you see Goldman Sachs Trading Company. You go in there, they will have, oddly enough, a gold jacket. Who would have thought that? Goldman Sachs, gold jacket. If you go in and you see somebody in a red jacket, that's Wells Fargo's investment company. Because red is their, red and yellow are their colors. If you see someone go in there, I'm trying to think who has, Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley's jackets are blue. And you can always find a Morgan Stanley trader around their particular commodity pit by the color of their jacket. Same thing with Wells Fargo, same thing with Goldman Sachs, same thing with all of them. Okay? But here's how the trading really works. I'm going to key in a little bit on how trading actually works. All right.
Do you trade?
No, but I know how. The traders, all those guys wearing the jackets, they really work for themselves. You're like, what does that mean? It means that they have an equity account. And they've used their own money to buy stocks in the companies and the different types of items that they work with in their pit. And they keep those in their account. And when somebody wants to buy something, they go into their account and sell it to them. Well, do you think they're selling it to them at a cut rate price?
No.
No. They're setting the price for that particular stock themselves. So if I'm selling something and it goes to a trader and he buys it at 19 3/4 a share, he holds it in his account. Nobody makes any more trades that day in that particular company. But somebody comes in the following day and wants to buy it at 17 3/4. The trader immediately opens the trading at 20. And if the person doesn't want to buy it at 20, they don't get it. He bought it at 19 3/4. He's selling it at 20. He's going to make 25 cents per share profit, which then goes right into his bank account so that he can buy more stocks for his personal securities account. And that's how the traders buy and sell stocks. It's not the stock exchange that sets the opening prices at the morning bell. It's the individual traders in those particular companies that open the trading at a certain price. How about that? And when they're trading over computers, you see they have their computer in front of them and they're standing at their office, and the office has the sign of their trader company, their trading company over it. They're standing at it. That's their office. That's their entire office. There they can access their investment account. They can access their banking information. They can find out who's buying what and how they're going to sell it and what they're starting to trade at. And if somebody starts, one of the other traders prices the same stock lower than what they have in their account, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to hold on to it. They're going to hold on to it until it reaches the level during the day that they want to sell it for. And then they sell it, making the profit that they know they can make.
Is there a difference between trading stocks and trading currencies?
Yes, but similar. That wasn't very helpful. Trading stocks is because you're trading ownership shares in the second market. Trading currency, there is a currency exchange, and it works in very similar fashion. There are traders and there are banks that hold certain amounts of currency and then put those on the market at a certain level each day. Well, when you want to buy, say you're going to Europe and you want to buy euros. Euros and the dollar are pretty close together right now. So if you go into the bank and you say, I need 500 euros because I'm flying to France tomorrow, they are going to charge you 500 euro value that's being sent by the European bank. So it's set right now at $1.17 per dollar. They're going to charge you $500 plus 17 times 500 cents. And then they're going to mark it up a certain amount for their profit that they're doing business. So everybody in the shares of those banks is going to make a little bit of money.
Right.
See how that works?
So if they trade or if they give you 500, if you have to pay $500 and the 17 times $500, when you go to another country, that's money
It's
value
actually
is
$557.
$507.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to go to another country, currency and it was cheaper, you'd be winning, right?
Well, if you decided, well, see, all of the European countries are on a single currency, except for Great Britain. So if you go to anywhere in Europe, including Greece, Italy, Poland, Germany, some of the Scandinavian countries, Ireland, they're all on the euro. So you would be paying the same thing because the European bank sets it for all of them. If you decide to go to the Middle East and you go to Egypt, their currency is entirely different. It's supported by their own central bank. So they're buying and selling their currency at a rate that's pegged to the US dollar every day. And that changes, that fluctuates. It even fluctuates during the day. But it's somewhat similar to stocks in that stocks also fluctuate during the day. Okay? Okay. And it's done, most of this, because everything fluctuates during the day and is all different, and you have all these traders involved and they're all working basically as entrepreneurs. Use of computers is very important, and they are also regulated by securities law, and they have to fill out reports every single month about what they've bought and sold as well. Let's talk about a lesson from real life. Anybody heard of the United States versus Martha Stewart? What did she do? Securities fraud, insider trading. Okay. Sometimes these are more illustrative of what's going on with corporate finance than anything else. So let's talk about that. 10 years ago, it was a problem to have entrenched management. But today, we worry about incarcerating our management because they are insider trading. There's a book out there that's called Good Corporate Governance, The Road Back by Richard Coase. He's a merger and acquisitions lawyer, and he wrote it back in 2003, and it deals with some of the pitfalls that can occur between individuals who are buying and selling stocks and working with companies, and things they fall into when they try and do too much too fast, or they try and circumvent the law. So the characters we have here, and what happened was, there was this company called ImClone. It was a biotech firm in New York. The CEO was a fellow named Sam Waksal. The chief operating officer was Harlan Waksal, Sam's brother. So see, we have the family relationship here again. Erbitux was the experimental anti-cancer drug that ImClone was developing. And Bristol Myers, probably all heard of Bristol Myers, was partnered with ImClone in developing Erbitux. So they're all together and they're all working on this stuff. Well, Martha Stewart, the chair and the CEO of Martha Stewart Living Omni Media Incorporated, and Sam Waksal were friends. And they met when Waksal was dating Martha Stewart's daughter. Beyond that, there was an individual, a Merrill Lynch broker named Peter Bakanovich. His clients included the Waksals and Martha Stewart, and his assistant, Douglas Vanille, who was also working at Merrill Lynch. In 2001, at the end of the year, ImClone completed a lengthy, complex procedure, which was a rolling application for FDA, Food and Drug Administration, approval of Erbitux. Imclone had touted the drug to investors as a breakthrough blockbuster drug that would be one of the most important drugs in the history of oncology. Remember what your grandmother said? If it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And then you see all these old Western movies with these guys selling bottles of what turned out to be cheap whiskey out of the back of a wagon as a cure-all for everything. Yeah, cure-all for life. That's right. Well, Erbitux turned out to be a lot like that. Because according to Imclone, the clinical studies had shown a reduction of tumor size when it was used in combination with radiation or other chemotherapy. All right, what's the first bell that goes off in our heads? Anthony?
Of course, it's gonna decrease tumors, it's being used with radiation, so that's kind of.
If you're already using chemotherapy and you add radiation to it, the tumors are going to decrease. Okay? So, Imclone was just another medication that was supposed to help, but they said it was a cure-all. Bristol Myers paid $1 million for 20% in Imclone and another $1 billion for 40% of the sales in the United States. So they had a big part of the financing. The FDA refused to file the application for approval because warning bells went off in their heads at the FDA. And they said, we want you to start all of the research all over again because we don't think this is exactly what's happening here. Sam Waksal found out about that December 26th. The application was to be rejected on the 28th. The FDA had talked about it privately up until the 25th. So Waksal found out about it somehow on the 26th, and it was going to be rejected on the 28th. In the subsequent 48 hours, Waksal sold his shares in Imclone and advised his relatives to do the same. What do we have there? We have a tipper because that's inside information. Good. We have inside information with a tipper, and all of his relatives are tippees. He sold all 80,000 shares of his and advised his father, his daughter, and other relatives who held another 40,000 shares to sell theirs. They all sold them on the same day. Now, does that send bells off at the SEC? Because they're getting reports every day on NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange stocks. That set off huge alarm bells. And they knew that they couldn't possibly, or shouldn't possibly, have known about it because the FDA had not announced it and had not told anybody yet. They were going to announce it in an open meeting on the 28th. So Pekanovich was Waksel's broker, remember, made the sales on the 27th of December. And then he sold Martha Stewart's shares on December 27th. Who told him to do that? Well, somebody did, and she found out somehow. How did she find out? Probably because Waksal called her, too. And she made notes on her calendar that she had a meeting with her broker, which was Pekanovich, in order to set up a sell of certain stocks. He He later told authorities there was a stop loss order on the stock, that's Pekanovich, if the value fell below $60 a share. Faneuil supported the stop loss order story in exchange for Knicks basketball tickets. He risked going to jail for 6 years for Knicks basketball tickets. Anybody here from New York? Anybody here a big basketball fan? How have the Knicks been doing for a decade? I mean, all the way back to the late 90s, how have they been doing?
No, that was straightened out.
They'll straighten out. Maybe they'll straighten out, but back in the late 90s and up till the last few years, they haven't been doing that great, have they?
2018.
When they had J.I.
And something, there was a high. This is way before both of them.
This is way before. This is way before. They were just
Oh,
children.
you talking about before us?
Yeah. This is when they were just kids playing in elementary school. But Faneuil supported that story and later admitted that he called Martha Stewart and told her about instructions from Pekanovich that the Waxel family was unloading all of their Implum stock. So he told her that she needed to do the same thing. She sold 4,000 shares of that stock on December 27th, the same day as everybody else. She sold it for $57.86 a share. Proceeds totaled $227,824. She avoided over $45,600 in losses. When she was arrested and was presented with an indictment, her defense was that the stop loss order that she had on all of her stocks in her account ordered Peter Pekanovich to sell if any of her stocks fell below $60. So, they confiscated her calendar. Oh, and most of the stuff was missing until like December 28th. But she sold on the 27th. She had the meeting on the 26th. So how did they figure out that she'd even talk to these people on the 26th or the 27th?
Phone record.
Well, they did use phone records. But they also did something else. This goes back to all your childhood, I want to be a detective days.
Credit cards.
If you want to find out what somebody wrote on a
I
pad,
checked years ago.
what do you do? What do you do with that pad?
You just,
You take a pencil and you pencil over the calendar. They penciled over the calendar and it just popped right out. Because she had a very,
and they held up in court.
it held up in court because it was her handwriting. Because they brought in a handwriting expert to analyze it. And it was her handwriting. So it held up. So Sam Waxel, who was the head of Implum, charged with perjury because he lied to investigators under oath, and securities fraud. Now, this is where the jail time comes in. He was also charged with sales tax fraud because he owed money to the IRS and to the state of New York for paintings that he had bought with money from the Erbitux sale to Bristol Myers. He bought those paintings from a New York City gallery, but he never paid the tax. So he's in trouble with the feds and with the state of New York. Now let me tell you something about what happens even if a federal case can't be brought, and federal cases collapse all the time. if there is a tax case in the state of New York, the state of New York will prosecute and somebody will go to jail. Just because they're in a very important position doesn't mean that they're not going to be charged and they're not going to end up doing time. Because New York will go after them. The civil case was pursued by the SEC, and what they did was they alleged violation of corporate fiduciary duty due to the insider trading implications, and said that by selling his personal holdings on insider information, he had violated that duty. So, how did it work out? How did it work out for them? How did it work out for her? What happened? Well, Sam Waxel pled guilty to 6 criminal violations related to insider trading, including conspiracy, including securities fraud, and including perjury. He then settled the civil case for $800,000 with the SEC. So he may have made $275,000, but he ended up paying the SEC $800,000. And they also put in place a permanent ban from him serving as an officer or the director of any public company. And he went to prison.
How long he did?
I think he went to prison for 26 years, and he should be out. That case was brought in
That boy still on there?
2006, so he should be back in 2032. Yes. Huh? You know, the same thing just went through my mind, El Paso. He's gonna be walking with a cane. He's gonna be an old man. There ain't gonna be anybody want to touch him.
He's gonna stay in there.
He might as well just find a nice house in upstate New York on the top of a mountain and just stay there. Peter Bogdanovich, who was the broker, what happened to him in criminal court? Well, he was indicted for perjury, making and using false documents, because he changed a bunch of stuff at the investment house to make it look like it wasn't insider trading and like they weren't selling things all at the same time. Obstruction of justice, because he refused to cooperate with investigators. Conspiracy to obstruct justice as well. So because he told Fanul what he should be doing. So he obstructed justice, he conspired to obstruct justice, he made and used false documents, and he was indicted for perjury. He was pursued by the SEC in the civil court based on his insider tip to Martha Stewart about Waxel's sale of Inclone. So, here I have the actual punishments that they got. Sam Waxel, it wasn't 26 years, although that was kind of funny. A lot of people thought he should have gone to jail for 26 years. Sam Waxel pled guilty to perjury and securities fraud. And he started serving a 7 1/3 year sentence on July 23rd, 2003. So he got out in 2010. And then Peter Bogdanovich was fired from Merrill Lynch for violation of a company rule precluding disclosure of one client's activities to another client. And then he was charged with 4 counts of perjury and obstruction of justice. I don't have the results of what happened to him, but I suspect he also received a very similar sentence, 7 to 10 years. Douglas Fanul, who was the guy that did all this legwork for Knicks basketball tickets, pled guilty to accepting a bribe. Maybe the bribe wasn't worth that much, but he was bribed. And he cooperated with the government in the prosecution of Martha Stewart and Bogdanovich. Now Martha, in whom everyone was interested at the time, because she was the domestic diva, and still is to some extent, although not quite what she was to begin with. The government alleged she knew and received inside information about the sale of Clone and sold her stock based on that insider information. She also fabricated a story about the stop loss order with her broker to sell Clone if the price fell below $60. So that whole story was made up. She fabricated the explanation for her sale on December 27th. In other words, she didn't want to be bothered watching the stock while she was on vacation. That was the story. And she attempted to erase and alter computer files and her calendar to cover up her behavior. And then she also denied phone calls and a breakfast meeting with Makanovich during the investigation, which also showed up on her calendar. And they figured that out because there were days missing in between the sheets of her calendar. And they went back and pencil colored all of them and found out what they were. They gotta do that. So, if there was a plea bargain, this is how Waxel got sent to prison. He pled guilty. So the definition is that the defendant accepts a guilty plea, but to a lesser charge. So all the big stuff he didn't go to jail for. He went to jail for all the little stuff. It's a benefit to the prosecution because it's a win. They get a conviction without having to go to trial and spend all that time and money going to trial. There's a benefit to the defense because the conviction to a higher level charge is avoided and the sentence is negotiated according to the federal sentencing guidelines so that it's reduced. Martha Stewart, in all of her wisdom, decided to reject the plea bargain. The offer that was made was 1 count of obstructing justice with 4 to 10 months in jail. She rejected that. She thought that nobody was going to convict her. So, in the end, Martha went to federal prison for 2 years. Went to prison for 2 years. It wasn't a bad prison to be in. It was in Pennsylvania, and it's attached to a military installation. And she had to do jobs around the military installation, like trimming the grass on the golf course with a pair of fingernail clippers. Make sure they were all the same length.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of stuff. That's a joke, but you know, it just about fits. You know, I mean, how easy could it be if you're out on a golf course? Even if you're out on a golf course, you're down there on your hands and knees and you're clipping each blade of grass with a fingernail.
I would clip one at a time.
They do. That's the funny part.
Is that like a real punishment?
No, but they come up with some pretty ingenious ones, believe me. So shareholders of Martha's company sued her for breach of fiduciary duty because she violated her own brand. She was the brand. She did something wrong. They sued her because her brand was now tarnished and they were losing value in her company. So she was convicted of an act, what we call moral turpitude. Under laws of the state of New York and New Jersey, where her company was primarily held, she could be removed as a member of the board of directors, and she was the chairman. So they removed her for an act of moral turpitude and was then convicted of a breach of fiduciary duty. So her brand was destroyed, and so she was taken out of the company completely, sent to prison, and her daughter stepped in to run the company. And the company has done very well. Well, Martha's not always associated with things as actively as she was before, because people still remember that. Okay. Oh, I have some notes on what happened at the trial, if you'd like to hear them. The prosecution painted her as a liar and an insider trader, and made her look really, really nasty. Although the defense came back and said, oh, that's normal. She did what she was supposed to do. It was a prudent investment, and she was a prudent investor, and the jury didn't believe them one bit. So, all of the witnesses, according to my notes, were very effective for the prosecution, but the defense didn't challenge enough testimony for things to work out okay. Stewart refused to believe throughout the entire trial that she could be convicted. And so she kept going, saying, oh, people are not going to convict me, I'm Martha Stewart. What gets someone convicted more quickly than anything else? Arrogance. Yeah, being cocky. Okay, so Martha Stewart, Nora Bakanovich, at their trials, testified on their own behalf. That's what the jury wanted to hear. Why did she do it? What did she do? How was she affected by the result? They don't put witnesses. Maybe their prosecution and defense teams didn't want to put them on the stand because witnesses sometimes will deliberately lie on the stand. Well, that would add perjury to the rest of the thing. She'd have to go through trial for that. Or because the witnesses won't help themselves, which is probably what happened in this case. And she was really quite unremorseful. So Stewart and Bakanovich were convicted on all charges. And the mistake was Stewart's because she didn't settle. It wasn't the attorney's decision, it was hers. The actual case, this is something that I just really didn't believe. The actual case that was presented lasted less than 1 day. You would think somebody with something this serious going on would be there for a while, right? You think a couple of weeks? Anyway, bless you. That's not what happened. 1 day. It went to the jury, and it took the jury 45 minutes to decide what was going on in that case. And here's the thing. I don't know if I mentioned this before when we were talking about jurisprudence. When the trial goes on and the jury goes out to deliberate, if they come back quickly, that's not good news for the defense. The defense has probably been held liable or convicted. But it's real good news for the prosecution. If it goes beyond 2 hours on out to days, then that's better for the defense because the jurors are thinking that maybe the defendant had some reason for what they did and they might need to be cut a break. But it didn't happen that way. She faced up to 20 years in prison, but she got 2. So that was it. That's the case story for this particular section on investments. That's the end. Have a good break. Be safe. We're going someplace. You're going to do safe? Yes, you do. Okay, so you want to be able to play this year, right? So be safe. Get back here in good shape, and I'll see you next week.
I'm always every year. You know, when I first came here, yeah, 3 years.